Доброго ранку нашим гостям, всім, хто
Good morning, everybody, to all those who are listening to us online. And the topic now is launch of new crowdfunding platform to help Ukraine's war veterans. We have Mr. Paul Nila, founder and CEO of Statement Email, writer and political commentator in Ukraine. Mr. Marko, Suprun, co-founder of Patriot Defence, and Ihor Kholodylo, founder, member of Pobratymy, and instructor of Patriot Defence. You're welcome, dear guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you to those of you friends and members of the press who have made it here to the Ukraine Crisis Media Center this morning to listen to this presentation. I'd like to thank the Ukraine Crisis Media Center for hosting us. And what I would like to do is to introduce to you a new initiative that is an important initiative. This is something that my wife and I have been working on for quite some time, and it's with great pride this morning that I deliver this to you. But before I get into talking about what's new, what I'd like to do is to take a few steps back. The reason why I do this, well, there are two reasons why I do this. One is that we have an international audience watching this presentation because this is being broadcast live online. And the other is so that some of you may better understand my motivation, who I am, and what it was that inspired me to create this new crowdfunding platform. I want to start with the revolution, actually. What happened on Maidan was undeniably a just people's revolution. A deeply corrupt regime, one which was intent in not allowing Ukraine to develop along a democratic course, was toppled. The revolution lasted for 93 days and it took great bravery. What should have happened was that the millions of Ukrainians who took part in those events should have got a pat on the back. Instead, we were slandered, labeled by the Russian media and their useful idiots as extremists and worse. And we were rewarded with war. Since that time, I've kept myself busy trying to write about events here from a factual but also a Ukrainian perspective to help people around the world get a better understanding of what's going on here. I've written about the origins of the war. I've written much about the Minsk peace agreements and the Geneva peace agreement that came before that. And I've written about who is responsible for not meeting their commitments related to those agreements as well. Sometimes I write about the reform successes and failures that we've had as well. I believe, and I've written an article on this topic, I believe that Ukraine is a test case for the entire region. The problems that led to our last revolution are not exclusive to Ukraine. They are commonplace in other post-Soviet states as well. And the things we are working out here, like how to stop connected insiders from winning state tenders all the time, how to reboot the police forces and break their historic link with organized crime, and reforming the banking sphere by taking money washing machines away from oligarchs. These are things that are being tested here to varying degrees of success. These are things that will eventually be adopted throughout the wider region as well. And the point is, Vladimir Putin believes this too. He sees Ukraine's progress as a threat to the system that he presides over, and he's right. That's why Maidan is slandered by the media he controls. That's why he had to create war. His aim in starting the conflict in Ukraine's east was to tell his own people that nothing good can follow an uprising. So don't even try, is his message to the Russian people. He had to create then the facts on the ground to prove his own point, though. Ukraine as a nation got on with a new task at hand: to defend itself from Russia's unprovoked aggression. What most commentators get wrong about this entire conflict, though, is that there is an assumption that there was indeed local agency behind the events that led to war. This is not true, and we can look at the examples of Slavyansk and Kharkiv to show that this is not true. I wrote an article maybe 1 year ago called The Tale of Two Cities, which looks at those two cases. Slavyansk was the epicenter of the war. That was where it began. On the day, in fact, that Slavyansk was seized, a Ukrainian flag was hung on my balcony, and it flies there to this very day. I consider myself Ukrainian. And I consider it a great honor when Ukrainian friends of mine call me Ukrainian as well. Though I'm Irish by birth, this has been my home for 15 years. My wife is Canadian, and this has also been her home for 15 years as well. We deeply care about this country because we're involved in what is happening here. We can also look, and what we should look at, is cases like Avdiivka. Avdiivka is a place where there's a significant battle going on for a couple of years. And if there was any evidence at all that the residents of Avdiivka themselves were fighting to get away from being a part of Ukraine, we would have a conversation to have. We would have to sit down with those people and say, what are your issues? And address these things. But there's no evidence of this. There's no evidence at all that the people of Avdiivka want anything other than a return to peace. So you have to ask yourself the question, why is there war there? There is war there because it was created by an outside party. And that outside party is Russia. This unprovoked aggression that is coming from Russia is something that is not only a challenge to Ukraine, but it's a challenge to the rest of the world as well at the same time. One other issue that's worthy of note that I just want to cover before we get into the presentation here, and I let you know what statement email is all about. I heard a comment recently. I was at a conference and former First Lady Katerina Yushchenko was delivering the keynote speech, and something that she highlighted that I think is not also understood internationally, but at the same time, it's not talked about enough inside of Ukraine as well. There are 1.7 million displaced people from the Donbass. One of them is a very, very good friend of mine who's sitting in this room today. 1.7 million people have left their homes and their lives, and they've rebuilt, and those people have been absorbed throughout society, throughout this country. That vast number of people have been taken in by communities across the country without fuss. This is a testament to the Ukrainian spirit and what we can achieve together. There are many good people in this country who are helping each other. This is something that I'm proud to be a part of in every way. To begin this presentation now, what I would like to do is to introduce you to myself and one of the speakers. My name is Paul Nyland. I am the founder of Statement Email, but as I said in my introductory remarks there, I've been writing a lot about the conflict here, about how it started, and about other issues related to Ukraine. With me is Mr. Marko Suprun. You'll see on the screen behind me that both Marko and I have various times presented the Stop Fake TV program, where on a weekly basis we take a list of Russian propaganda stories about Ukraine and we debunk them thoroughly. Marko surprised me the first time that I saw him doing this program because he owns a tie, which I wasn't aware of previous to that. I love the fact that Marko is wearing a fabulous t-shirt today about Oleg Sentsov. I love the fact as well that his wife just changed her Facebook profile picture to that very same image that you see on Marko's t-shirt. It's an important question. Oleg Sentsov has been sitting in a Russian prison now for 3 years? For 3 years. His crime is that he objected to Russia's takeover of his homeland in Crimea. Also on the slide behind me as an introduction to some of the articles that I've written. This one here is a title that I particularly like. The article is simply called "Vladimir Putin is a Liar." When I wrote that article, I said, this is not diplomatic language, and I didn't expect many diplomats to actually share or tweet that. Many did, because that article actually contains 13 different links to 13 different reports that demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that Russia is responsible for the war in eastern Ukraine. And so when Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Peskov and Sergei Lavrov and all those other people, when they deny Russia's involvement, it is a lie. And that's not diplomatic language, but it is the objective truth. Since the beginning of this conflict in eastern Ukraine, this nation of volunteers has collectively mobilized an army. Ukraine has fed them and equipped them, stitched together camouflage netting for them, and delivered rations to frontline positions. In this very building, in Ukrainsky Dom, I've watched volunteers, I've watched teams of ladies standing there taking rags and tights and tearing them into strips and creating those camouflage nettings. There's a very, very good article by a very good writer. One of the best writers on Ukraine, in actual fact, is a gentleman called Peter Dickinson. And he's written an article on the volunteer miracle that is Ukraine's armed forces, and how not just those who mobilized and went to the east to defend their country, but everybody else in the country supported them and supported their efforts in every way that was possible. One of the volunteers who took up arms and went to fight is my friend Kolya, who unfortunately has got stuck in traffic and wasn't able to be here for the beginning of this press conference. But Kolya is a veteran of the battle for Donetsk airport. He's a cyborg. When he was rotated out of the airport to recharge, he would often come to Kiev, and he would stay with my wife and I. I looked into that soldier's eyes many times in the days when he was in my home. Few of us can imagine the horrors of war, but there are many of us, too many of us in fact, who have sat along soldiers who have served. They are our brothers, our fathers, our friends, our classmates, our sons and daughters. Kolya was a teacher before he went to war. I would sit with him in the evenings, going off my scripted remarks now. I would sit with him in the evenings and look at him. And sometimes he was lost in whatever was going on in his mind. And it is that meeting, that experience, that has motivated me to try and raise money to help veterans returning from the conflict deal with issues like PTSD. There are many organizations that have taken part in this crowdfunding effort. An organization my wife and I have supported is one called Army SOS. Army SOS have been building UAVs that fly over the occupied territories, that fly over the battle zones. They've been equipping Ukraine's armed forces with tablets that have pre-programmed maps inside them, and crowd-sourced, crowd-created, Ukrainian-built locating systems for directing artillery fire. Another fabulous organization that I'm also proud to have helped and worked alongside in various times is Patriot Defence. And you see some images on the screen there of the work that they've done, but Marko Suprun, who is one of the founders of Patriot Defence, will be talking a little bit more about that as we move on. The fact of the matter is that Patriot Defence, which was founded by Marko and Uliana, they realized in the early days that the way that Ukrainian soldiers were being equipped when they were going into war was simply not sufficient. The first aid kits that they were issued were substandard completely. And it wasn't only the first aid kits, but it was also the medical training that you would need as well, specifically to deal with battlefield injuries. So Patriot Defence went about training something like 30,000 soldiers who went to the front line. Each of them were better equipped to save the lives of their comrades if they took an injury in the field next to them, because of Patriot Defence. Patriot Defence equipped them individually with NATO standard first aid kits to help save lives, and they have saved many, many lives. And I'm deeply proud and honoured, actually, that Marko is here with me today. There's been now something like 335,000 Ukrainian men and women who have served their country in the Ukrainian armed forces. The issue with psychological stress, the issue with post-traumatic stress, or indeed post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a very specific term which looks at a very specific medical diagnosis. But the wider issue with psychological questions that veterans need to overcome is an acute problem that we have here. And it's an acute problem because not enough is being done to help to rehabilitate these people. But it's an acute problem because of the size of the number of veterans that have served their country. It is 335,000. There's a statistic on the slide here behind me which is disputed. One report I read as recently as 2 weeks ago suggested that there are as many as 1,000 suicides, people that have returned from the front. They've survived the front lines. They've survived the conflict. And then they come back and they take their own lives. The figure is disputed. The official number is just in excess of 500. I think it's 554. But it's too much. It's just too much. These are heroes. These are people who require our assistance. And this is not a Ukrainian-specific problem, although the size of the problem is why this needs to be addressed now. The issue of dealing with psychological trauma after a war, after fighting in a war, is something that affects soldiers from around the world. We know it very well from American soldiers and British soldiers that have served in the Falklands, in Iraq. This is not specifically a Ukrainian issue, but this is something that Ukrainians, I believe, need to gather together to address. There's different kinds of crowdfunding opportunities. There's different ways that people have been able to demonstrate that they show their support for Ukraine's armed forces. That can include buying T-shirts which have an element of a charitable donation as part of the purchase price. And when you walk down the street and you're wearing a T-shirt that says people support Ukraine's armed forces, you're making a statement. You're telling people on the day that you wear that T-shirt, this is what's important to you. What we've created with Statement Email, and specifically with UkrainianPatriot.com, is another way you can do this. Just another way that you can demonstrate your patriotism. I love the fact that as I walk through Kiev or Kharkiv or Lviv or any city that I've been to throughout Ukraine, I love the fact that we see these displays of patriotism all the time. I particularly like that Range Rover, by the way. That's a very nice trizub cutout, but this guy here is probably my favorite. This here is a presentation now about Ukrainian Patriot, what it is we've created and how it works. Go to the Ukrainian Patriot website and hit register now. Let's say, for example, our friend Taras, who has a boring Gmail address, decides that he wants to have Taras Shevchenko at UkrainianPatriot.com. He simply then goes into his PayPal and he logs in and he pays a sum of $10. And that's it. Once he's done that, he then receives a confirmation email from us and he receives another email that comes from Gmail itself. And with Gmail, there is a verification code that says you want to add another account to your Gmail address. Once that's done, Taras can decide which email address he wants to use. And it's as simple as that. Taras can email people out of his tarasshevchenko@gmail.com or tarasshevchenko@ukrainianpatriot.com. Every day, with every single communication, Taras can show that he's a patriot, that he's contributed to an important crowdfunding initiative, and that he supports the other patriots in this country. Those who have served and those who deserve our support. What I've just shown you is an animation of the registration process. In reality, it might take you 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes of your life to show people that you care, to show people that you're a patriot of Ukraine. I don't know those stencils that we saw on cars there earlier on. I don't know how much they cost or how long they took to put on, but I guess it's probably longer than 2 minutes. we're launching Statement Email, which was inspired by Ukraine. But in actual fact, as I've gone through the process, or as we've gone through the process of building this, we've been asked on many occasions by many different friends whether we can run crowdfunding campaigns for other issues as well. I have a friend here in Kiev, a British gentleman who's also been here for 15 years, my very good friend Peter, and Peter is a cancer survivor. I was sitting with him one day and he says, "Paul, can you run a campaign to raise funds for cancer research?" Yep. Our auditors are Deloitte. We chose to work with one of the top 4 auditing companies in the world. The partner in Deloitte, who we work with for personal reasons, he asked me whether we could launch a campaign to fund autism research. Yeah, we can do that too. There are many important social issues that my wife Lana and I have cared about for a long time, things that we're passionate about, things like animal rights and things like climate change. They're also things that we are going to be in the future launching crowdfunding campaigns for from this platform. But we were inspired initially by Ukraine and by the story of Ukraine and by what has happened in Ukraine over the last few years, and inspired by the need to help right now. As we move into a global crowdfunding platform, which is coming very soon, I believed it was essential to put together a first-class team of people who are the management behind Statement Email. This is my bio here. It's going to be going up on our corporate site probably tomorrow. Another one of our partners is Mr. Flemming Jan. Flemming is a Danish business person who's been around these parts for a very long time. He's a very well-respected gentleman. He was appointed by the Queen of Denmark to be Denmark's honorary consul here from 2005 to 2011. Flemming is now the chief executive officer of a company in Spain called the 42 Degrees Company, and I'm proud to have him as my partner. Another partner is sitting in the front row. His name is Alex Pavlenko. Alex and I met at a tech conference. I was actually the MC of the conference. I'd been asked to come and help guide the process along, and Alex was one of the people in the very last panel of the day. And he stood up and his opening remarks were, "I'm Ukrainian and I'm proud of it." Alex runs an IT business. He runs a very successful IT business, and I thought to myself, I need to talk to this guy. I have something that he will most certainly be able to help with if we put together this partnership. His team, when they took what had originally been created, they deconstructed it totally. They completely rebuilt the architecture. They completely rebuilt the websites. And especially in the last couple of weeks, your boys have been absolutely phenomenal. I'm grateful to you for being my friend and partner, and I'm seriously grateful to Max and the other guys that have been working on this as well. Another partner that we have is Mr. Stuart Smith. Stuart is a British gentleman, and he and his wife are very good friends of ours as well. Stuart is a former senior person with PricewaterhouseCoopers and with Deloitte, and his part of this initiative, this project, is simply invaluable. He's a fabulous person with huge integrity and a man that I respect greatly as well. As I showed you during the presentation, the cost of registering a Ukrainian Patriot Statement email address is $10. The reason why we set it at $10 is because we wanted to have a donation level that's simply comfortable for anybody. We can afford $10, right? The split of that money is that simply 75% of every single donation goes directly to charity. Initially, of course, to Patriot Defence, but later on to the other charities that I've mentioned and to the other causes that I've mentioned. The reason, well, first of all, let me say that there are many companies that operate in the sphere of raising money for charity. Often they charge exorbitant fees. Often, if you look at certain scandals in the UK and in newspapers, something that Stuart Smith had highlighted to me, in fact, you'll see people, setting up initiatives where 20, 30%, as little as 20 or 30% is what ends up finally getting passed on to the charity. As an agency collecting monies for charities, 75% is already quite a high figure, quite a reasonable figure. The 25% that's left over, first of all, I mentioned that we're audited by Deloitte. We're a completely transparent organization, a completely transparent platform. Every single donation, everything gets audited. And so the monies that are due to charitable programs, 100%. Without doubt, well, not a penny more and not a penny less, they will be donated to charities. However, hi Kolya. I was just talking about Kolya earlier on, and it's nice to see that he's shown up wearing his medals.
Hello, I'm sorry. This was pretty hard traffic.
Take a seat, dude. You missed the bit where I was talking about you. The 25% that I'm talking about there, it's important to understand where that goes. That 25% is what we need to cover our operational costs. The largest part of that, in actual fact, is a tax burden. What we are constantly seeking to do is we're seeking more operational efficiency. When we can make our operation more efficient, and specifically if we address the tax issue that I just mentioned, then our operational costs go down, and in time, as the operational costs go down, the percentage that will be donated to charities is going to rise. What I would now like to do is to hand over to Marko and Ihor, because now I've introduced what this platform is about, why it's important, how it works for donors and subscribers. They're going to talk more about what they're actually going to do and what the necessary elements of helping and assisting veterans returning from conflict are all about. I give the floor to you.
Доброго дня. Paul, thank you.
Дуже дякуємо.
To be brief, Patriot Defence continues its mission of training military and civilians in life-saving first aid. The project started, as Paul pointed out, in 2014 to train and hand out as many IFACs as we possibly could. We put the goal of 10,000 for us, and I have to slow down apparently. You should hold a yellow light, actually. That's a taxi reference that nobody really appreciates. We met that goal in February of 2015, followed in by an additional 20,000 IFACs. We expanded the program to include a program for combat medics that we have trained apparently up until recently 401 combat medics and have distributed 214 medical backpacks. We then moved forward with a course called Ukrainian Trauma Life Support, or Підтримка життя під час травми, and have trained 142 military and 293 civilian doctors. Early on, and I think it was in 2015, we met with Ihor Kholodylo, who I then knew as Diver by his call sign. There were several initiatives involved in providing technical support and training to Ukrainian soldiers and in the Ministry of Defense or the Armed Forces, as well as the Ministry of the Interior, basically everyone who was involved in the then the ATO. He was one of the few people who then we had met who had espoused the belief, not even a belief, but the understanding that NATO protocols and tactical combat casualty care is something that's going to make a difference on the front. After his service, Ihor joined our team, and we sent him to the United States to become a certified emergency medical technician. At the same time, however, there was an initiative called Pobratymy, Brotherhood, Brothers in Arms, that was very instrumental in providing the kind of psychological support for veterans who are returning from the front. This issue is unfortunately, as usual with media, can get the message can get messed up and missed in the fog of what Ukraine is facing. And because we have other veterans who are also part of our team, I noticed a big difference in the program established by Pobratymy in how I personally dealt with veterans. So our intention was to cooperate, and I think it was in December of 2017, the way Pobratymy works and how they operate, which is on a peer-to-peer basis. We helped with one of the modules that they were then finishing. And since then, I believe in the program. I think it's one of the best approaches that I've seen and read of regarding, I really don't even know what the term would be, psychological, they say psychological rehabilitation, but that's really not it.
Adaptation.
Thank you. Psychological adaptation. And again, PTSD is a very tricky phrase. A lot of people, unfortunately, think that everyone who experienced the war is going through PTSD. That's not necessarily the case, and that's also telling that we don't have an accurate system of tracking and really knowing what the situation is on the ground. But I'd rather introduce Ihor Kholodylo, diver, to speak more about Pobratymy and some of the things that we want to do, thanks in large part to the effort of Paul and Statement Email, to make sure that there's adequate cooperation, functional cooperation, and determined cooperation to help Ukrainians, veterans, as they come back from the front. Ihor?
Добрий день. Так, для
Good afternoon. I would rather speak Ukrainian because when I am listening to English, I have an impression that I am somewhere abroad. While I am in Ukraine, after coming back from the war, from combat activities, I started to work in two organizations. One in that unique training initiative, which was a training, tactical training for special forces of Ukraine. This was very useful, extremely useful and unique for Ukraine training course, and I'm grateful to this organization which had invited me. That was mentioned by Marko. Now simultaneously with that, I started to work with a Pobratymy initiative in the area of psychological adaptation of veterans. In working in those both organizations, I felt myself both Alexander of Macedonia and his horse Bucephal in one person. Now, I would like to draw your attention to an important aspect of our work, participation of NGOs in work with veterans when they come back from after combat activities, and we do not reject or we do not wish to compete with the state programs, with public programs, but all the international experience proves that in some cases state effort at the state level are either insufficient or inefficient. And that's why our objective is to involve those organizations which had become reputable by their previous activities, and to involve those people who are eager to support similar projects and to make these advantages profitable for businessmen. And in this way, we hope to produce positive outcome for the state, allowing to save money. Now a bit more about the Pobratymy initiative. Latest research suggests that there are two most important aspects of psychological adaptation after the combat activities. First of all, the combat trauma, the combat shock is extremely deep, and the post-traumatic syndrome is rather deep too. And one more factor is capability of this society to accept this veteran who had come back from the war. And unfortunately, this capability quite often is not obvious at a first glance. Our immediate work with those veterans who would like to come back, not just in reality, but psychologically too. And so the first is trainees for those who accept them, explaining what was going on in course of combat activities and what's going on with the person when he comes back. On the other hand, we need a set of tools which we can apply to adapt such a person. We need tools for make reorientation of this personality to allow this person to rediscover his or her personality, to rediscover new roles in society, thus to remove all that fear that he or she felt at the combat line, and to find new force to make decisions which are impossible for people without post-traumatic syndrome. Our training comprises two big blocks, two big parts. I'm a good example how this training works, by the way. Another aspect is that we try to introduce trainings for families of veterans who are coming back from the front line. These trainings quite clearly and positively demonstrate that families can revive their family ties with their fathers and husbands, and to revive those connections which were lost in result of post-traumatic syndrome. Special training is organized for wives of the veterans. Quite often there is such thing as psychological trauma for somebody else, not for yourself, and quite often veterans' wives experience even longer post-traumatic syndrome for their husbands. This brings me to the another important aspect about society, about communities. Ukraine is not unique in its strike with the post-traumatic syndrome. The unique feature is that for the first time we are facing hybrid war, and not the entire country is involved into this war. And Dr. Hebels in Kremlin, they understand quite often there's discrepancies in society. There's discrepancies as a result of hybrid war, and in result of this, local communities, society in general, is not ready to accept those people. And Pobratymy, understanding this, they carry out special work which is targeting all those people who are tackling this issue. In the United States, there was some period of time when all the news about American veterans were presented as the news, dark news about suicides or suicide pulp fiction, so to say. But we do not think that this is the right way to present those problems to society, and that's why we work very close with media, allowing them to form positive vision of these issues, not just to make heroes out of them, but to present them as real people with their needs. And now we are thinking about creation of Veterans Hub, and we plan to open it in September. In this hub, all the organizations dealing with the veterans' problems will be able to work together. Pobratymy is one of those organizations which very actively participate in this project. That is what I wanted to mention today in course of our presentation. I am very grateful to all our guests and journalists who stated their stance having come here.
There's a couple of final points that I'd like to make. First of all, none of this would have been possible without my wife, who is my business partner and my partner and has been behind this initiative and beside me every step of the way. I'm reminded during Maidan, for those of us who were there, there was a common call, Razum, Sila. Razum, Sila. This is a continuation of that. Together we are strong. Ukraine has proven over the last few years that when a collective effort is needed, Razum, Sila, when a collective effort is needed, Ukrainians stand up. Like Kolya, who I mentioned earlier, was a teacher before war came here. I thank you all very much for your attention. I don't want to repeat too many of the points that we've already made, but the issue here is acute, and it is acute because of the number of veterans that we have in this country, and that is why we need to come together now to help people to recover from their wartime experiences. To help them adapt was the exact right word that Igor used. Normally with a crowdfunding platform, if you look at anything like Indiegogo or GoFundMe or whatever else, people can contribute to campaigns there, but they never have a way of showing that they've contributed. With Statement Email, you contribute and you tell people, I did that, I'm a part of that. Razum, Sila. Together, we're doing this, right? this, I mentioned earlier on when Sloviansk was taken. Unfortunately, Sloviansk is now a peaceful city inside the government-controlled areas of Donbass. When Sloviansk was taken, that's when a Ukrainian flag flew on my balcony from that moment, and it's still there today. There are many ways in which we can show our patriotism. There are signs on the street. There are monuments to the Nebesnaya Sotnya, those who died during the Revolution of Dignity. This is a photograph that I took inside Mezhegir when I took my son there to go and enjoy the palatial estate that Yanukovych used to live in as he was robbing this country blind. Geroi nie wymieraj. Here, inside a company called Winner, which is the largest automotive importer in the country, they have a monument dedicated to their colleagues who have stepped up and fought for their country. People use phone covers to show their patriotism. People use their cars to show their patriotism. We've just given you another way to do that. Thank you all very, very much for your attention, and we'll open the floor if there are any comments or questions or queries. If there are none, we've explained everything far too well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Paul. Пані, панове, якщо маєте запитання, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, you're welcome.
Якщо вже прийшов.
Дякую за запрошення.
Thank you for invitation. Please excuse me being late. I've been Paul's acquaintance for a long time. Paul used to read my posts in the internet. I've heard about Marko. I recollect when in 79th Brigade, when I was a soldier, we had a big problem with the sleeping bags. At that time in the Donetsk airport, we were almost freezing at nights, and we requested that from many organizations, from the Ministry of Defense, but received that sleeping bags from the Patriot Defence. And when I became a veteran, and now I've been working on the initiative of integrating all the efforts of veterans. I'm a student in the Kyiv Mohyla Academy in psychology department, and the topic of my research is how to raise motivation among veterans, motivation for treatment of their psychological condition. And sometimes they are deprived from that support because of maybe even infrastructural obstacles, or they do not know where to get help. Sometimes this is stigma in result of trauma. That's why we are going to organize a special hotline, diagnostic hotline, where a veteran could request for help, having asked several questions, and in result of that telephone testing, he will be advised whether he or she need any assistance. And I feel that there is no single strategy, single hub, or single internet platform. Now I am a student of the Strategic Architect School, and I'm trying to build up such an idea on the framework of the Kiev Mohila Business School to create such a universal structure working with veterans. That's why I am very grateful to Paul for this initiative, and I believe that those people who will contribute their money, their effort, their spirits into this initiative, they will they feel satisfaction. So how to be registered? Kola, thank you for your contribution. He speaks good English, and
Because you were late because of the traffic, you missed a short presentation which shows how to do the registration. So we're not gonna go back through that now, but it's quite a simple process. I will show you personally, of course I will. Lots of what Kolya's just said is very important, and apps that veterans can download to access resources, and things like telephone hotlines for people who are just going through a tough time, right? Not necessarily contemplating suicide, but people just going through a tough time. That's all stuff that we can and should work into the programs, because what Ihor described, the process of one-on-one assistance to veterans, that's one thing, but it's actually reaching them first of all. And so I think the things that you've said, the telephone hotline and the app, I think they're very good ideas for us to build into our plan as we continue to build this forward. Do you have some other response?
Так, якщо можна, я дуже коротенько
I will speak very briefly. I have a brief comment on what you mentioned about the initiative. Thank you for your initiatives. And one more comment. The Veteran Hub, which I mentioned, intends to involve such people like you who care about veterans' problems. This Veteran Hub will have a team of experts who will provide assistance to such people as you trying to do a startup. They will facilitate launching of your startup. This is a good step for us who want to move forward. First of all, it's fantastic that you started to work on your PhD research, and if you need some help from me, I'm always happy to provide this. I recollect how we met in Muzeyny line in Kiev. About cybergs in 2015, when it was propaganda about Novorossiya, and there was a report what was in the primary medical kits of cybers, and the international Ukrainian Congress members presented this primary medical kit, which was additionally supplied with additional items, and this additional tailor-made first aid kits. Kits proved that training was needed, and I recollect how a showman had shown a needle, needle suggesting that this was needed to stop a blood, and this showed once again that it was needed. Let us meet together and discuss. Ms. Galina Savruk from the Kiev School of Network Architects, they're specialists.
Very important point as well. Just one other thing that I want to say. If you go to the website ukrainianpatriot.com and scroll down, when I showed the video earlier on, I gave the example of how a Gmail user would register and then integrate a statement email address. But this doesn't just work through Gmail. I put that up there because I wanted the simplest explanation of one of the biggest platforms. It also works through Hotmail. People who are using mail management programs like Thunderbird or Outlook or something like that, they can easily use a statement email address through there. There's also instructions for integrating with Android devices, with Apple devices, and so on and so on. So whatever the particular kind of technology or platform people are using, there are lots of ways that people can integrate. This isn't just something that works on one particular email service provider. This is something that works for basically everybody who wants one. And who wants to help is the important thing, and show they've helped.
Якщо можна, одне запитання від мене. Цей веб-сайт, він...
One question from me, whether this website is operation now, or it will start work soon. I tried, but it failed. Website
Ukrainianpatriot.com is currently in 2 languages. It's bilingual. It's in English and in Russian, because there are lots of Russian-speaking Ukrainian patriots at the end of the day. And I guess that was the working language for the developers, for the team who worked on this as well. The Ukrainian language version will be uploaded and will be available by the end of the day tomorrow, I believe, by close of business tomorrow. So the instructions and the information is all there in 2 languages today, 3 languages tomorrow. Це працює, так? Дякую. От, він теж відкриває.
На щастя, бо я вже позлякалася, що думаю, може, ще з сайтом не те. Дякую усім. Може, ще є запитання?
Thank you, everybody. Any further questions to Paul or to developers? Thank you very much.